as this battle in West Asia escalates, that's just being described as a mini World War III, President Trump has actually started ramping up pressure on Tehran. There's a new question that's emerging. Is Washington, D.C. now directly exploring the Kurdish front against Iran, opening the second front? The US is engaged with Iranian Kurdish groups holding talks with Kurdish leaders, though the White House, at least as of now, it is implying that those conversations are linked to the American base in northern Iraq. But at the center of this discussion is the KDPI, the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, an Iranian Kurdish group, an opposition group that's been seeking greater autonomy for the Kurdish people since 1945 and operates largely from bases in the northern part of Iraq. Tehran, however, looks at the KDPI and other Kurdish groups as armed separatist insurgent groups. If Kurdish fighters do enter this conflict, as is widely being anticipated as America's plan B, it may be seen as a major game changer because the war so far has just largely been fought through airstrikes and missile strikes. Boots on ground may just mean getting the Kurdish people to start from the periphery and start moving towards the core. The Kurdish push could potentially open the ground front along Iran's western border. And we'll just explain that territory to you because the Kurdish held control partially in Iran, partially in Iraq, partially in Syria, and a small part in Turkey. So that is the wider Kurdish held area of Kurdistan, as they call it there. Officially, Washington, D.C. says its goal remains destroying Iran's missile manufacturing capabilities, missile strike capabilities, their naval capabilities, and preventing Tehran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. But is regime change through the Kurdish people and also through the Sistan-Balochistan route? Is that the plan? At cross-border, Kurdish operations would actually require approval from the Iraqi Kurdistan region, which controls the territory from where such operations are expected to be launched. Iran is actually responding already to any such possibility. Iran has carried out a series of drone and missile strikes on these Kurdish bases in Iraq, and it's escalating. Perhaps that's a warning shot that's being fired. Don't even dare, don't even try. All of this suggests that if the Kurdish front opens, the war could enter an entirely new dimension. We get you more in this report.
A new front could soon open in the war against Iran. Not in the skies, but on the ground. Reports suggest Washington is exploring the possibility of Kurdish fighters launching cross-border operations from Iraq into western Iran. President Donald Trump has told US media a Kurdish attack on Iran would be wonderful and that he's all for it. Trump's remarks is fueling speculation that Washington could be exploring Kurdish forces as a pressure point against Tehran. Reports suggest Kurdish fighters could be armed to launch cross-border operations, forcing Iran to divert troops away from main battlefield. The White House, meanwhile, has completely denied the reports.
The Trump administration reportedly is considering arming Kurdish forces in the hopes of inspiring a popular uprising in Iran. Could you comment on that report?
I could comment on the fact that the president has held many calls with partners, allies, and leaders in the region, in the Middle East. He did speak to Kurdish leaders with respect to our base that we have in northern Iraq. But as for any report suggesting that the president has agreed to any such plan is completely false and should not be written.
The Kurds, a stateless ethnic group of nearly 30 to 40 million people spread across Iraq, Iran, Turkey and Syria, have long had tensions with Tehran. But the idea is already facing pushback. The Kurdistan Regional Government in Iraq has strongly denied involvement. Spokesperson Peshwa Haramani called reports that Iraqi Kurdistan would help arm or send Kurdish opposition groups into Iran completely unfounded. He says the Kurdish region is not part of any plan to expand the war and instead supports peace and stability. The war is already spilling into Iraq's Kurdish region. These visuals from Erbil show a drone shot near the airport crashing into a residential building in Ankawa. Earlier, Iranian missiles were also reportedly intercepted over Erbil, with smoke seen rising near a US base close to the airport. And as the war enters a more dangerous phase, talk of a Kurdish ground front is growing, even as Washington denies any such plan. With missiles now reaching Iraq's Kurdish region, the conflict between the US, Israel and Iran is clearly spilling beyond its original battlefield. Bureau Report, India Today.
So even as this conversation about a possible Kurdish front against Iran, this conversation increases and intensifies, history actually explains why Kurdish groups remain deeply cautious, apprehensive, and even suspicious about the intentions of Washington, D.C. Because this relationship has long been marked by strategic cooperation and repeated disappointment. Take, for example, 1988. Saddam Hussein carried out a chemical attack, gassing thousands of Kurdish people. Just a few years later, 1991, the first Gulf War, United States actually encouraged the Kurdish groups to rise against Saddam Hussein's regime. March 1991, Saddam Hussein's forces in Iraq, they brutally crushed the Kurdish uprising, and they expected, if the Kurdish groups expected that the Americans would come as the knight in shining armor, that really didn't happen. It was only in April 1991 did the US and allies step in, but established a no-fly zone in northern Iraq to protect the Kurdish population. Then again, let's talk about the second Gulf War, 2003. The Kurdish Peshmerga fighters, they fought alongside the US forces during the invasion of Iraq, and they played a very critical role. You know, when the forces were marching from the north towards Baghdad, these forces played a very critical role in toppling Saddam Hussein. But despite expectations, that independent Kurdish state did not emerge. Kurdish regions remain a part of Iraq, a part of Iran, a part of Syria, and a part of Turkey. History explains why many Kurdish leaders remain very apprehensive. They may be used yet again and abandoned